circumstances that can be negative to you in the big picture just because you dropped a couple of classes. So again, that's where I'm asking you to ask questions before you do those kinds of things so that you understand what the consequences of those things are and you're making an educated decision before it happens.
Let's say you're taking 21 hours and you decide one class is too much for you and you withdraw out of that one class. How much does that affect your pass rate?
Not much, because you're looking at 21, well, you'd be looking at, you know, if it's a 3-hour class, you'd be looking at 19 hours out of 21. You're still way above that 70% pass rate. But over time, if you consistently withdraw from a couple of classes every semester, that's going to catch up with you. You know, that pass rate is going to continue to slip downward. But if it's just one, you know, you've never dropped a class before and you just drop one, you're going to be fine. That's just a blip in the radar. You know, that's why it's 70% and not 95%. 70% gives you some leeway for life to happen, and you know, you to realize, oh, I took on more than I should, you know, or this class is way tougher than what I thought it is. I just can't manage everything with it, and those things happen. But if you ever have questions, you know, before you withdraw from a class, or if you're thinking about, you know, a really tough semester and you want to know how things are going to be impacted, that's what we're there for. We can help you understand, you know, the full ramifications of that. Okay. How are we doing on time? Okay, question for you. How much loan debt do you think the average Missouri Southern student has when they leave here? I know I've given you the really big picture aggregates, you know, limits, the top end of things. And I'll also tell you that about 70 to 80% of students on this campus do borrow something. Okay, about 90 to 95% receive some type of money. It may not all be loan money, but the majority of students here do borrow something. Okay, so that being said, what do you think after 4 years getting a bachelor's degree, most of our students leave here in debt with? Just give me guesses.
20 to 25,000.
20 to 25. I'm sorry, 40 to 50. 40 to 50,000. Okay.
35.
35,000.
30 to 35.
30 to 35. I think you guys will be impressed to see many of your peers are not borrowing the maximum every year. We have seen this slide upwards the last couple of years. You know, students are borrowing more. Families are probably having less available to them. I don't know if that's tornado related, if it's the economics of just, you know, families in this area. Last year it was around 18.6, I think, and now we're up to 19,489. In comparison to the national average, which is about 25,000 for a 4-year bachelor's degree, to me that shows a couple of things. Of course, we're in the Midwest. Our cost of living is a little less than other schools. Missouri Southern, as a 4-year public university, is probably in the lowest cost bracket. So it doesn't cost as much to go here as it does other schools in the country, which doesn't require students to borrow the maximum all the time. So there's probably lots of reasons for that, but it's very comforting in some ways to say, you know, we're under the national average of borrowing. Most of you are making very good, sound decisions on how much you're taking out before you leave here. If you look at that 19,489 from a repayment standpoint, I ran it through the payment calculator. If you were set up on a regular 10-year repayment plan, so just what everybody would get set up on when they graduate, your payments would be $224 a month for 10 years, which, not too bad, it's doable. The interest that would accumulate on that loan at 6.8%, which is the fixed interest rate that all federal Stafford loans are right now, that changes every year. The total interest on that loan over 10 years would be $7,400. So even though that loan debt is $19,489 on the day you graduate, it actually ends up being just under $27,000 by the time you pay it all off because of interest. So again, if you can afford to make payments while you're in school, even just a little bit, keeping the interest paid off would save you that $7,400 of accumulated interest over the 10 years. So anything you can do now, even how minimal it is, even if it's $10 a month, even if it's $20 a month, is something to help whittle down that interest from capitalizing, to help keep that loan from being as large as it is, you know, by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, I would say if you make extra payments or more than the minimum, that would help. with
That
the
would go
interest.
right towards principal. It'll, if you make an extra payment, say your payment's $224, and you make a $300 payment every month instead, that extra $76 would go towards whatever's accumulated interest first, and then if your interest was all paid up, then it would go towards principal. And of course, you would pay it off before the 10-year was up too. There's never a penalty for prepayment. There's never a penalty for paying extra. So you always have that option.
What, how is a scholarship treated in comparison to a loan while you're receiving loans?
A scholarship, of course, is free money you don't have to repay, same as a grant. Those are both what we call gift aid, so it's money you wouldn't have to repay. Those typically are applied first, so whenever we award your financial aid, we're going to award you all the free dollars first and then the loans later, so to minimize how much loan debt you have to take out. If you withdraw from school or fail classes, that's going to impact your eligibility for those dollars going forward. You know, so scholarships and grants probably have a little bit more strict criteria than loans would. So you may have to maintain a little higher GPA or a higher standard of credit hours completed, you know, in order to keep getting it. Say that to your question. Or are you thinking more specifically about something?
If you have unmet need and just, so you use that first and then that's that much less of the loan that you'll have to repay later,
Right.
basically.
Right. If you have, say, $15,000 of total costs available to use financial aid for, which is typical for a full academic year student. You have a $5,000 grant and a $2,000 scholarship, that's $7,000. So you've got $8,000 of unmet need, okay? So we would not let you borrow the full $15,000, you would only borrow the $8,000 that's remaining. So we'd award all of the free money first and take that right off the top and then give you what's left over in loan eligibility. Is that what you're asking? Okay. So, you know, keep in mind too that as a general rule, your student loan payment should be less than 8% of your gross income. So it also matters how much you're borrowing, what field you're going into, and what the going rate is of starting salaries for the people who are graduating with that degree. You know, a person graduating from nursing is probably going to have a different entry salary than a teacher or a social worker or a daycare provider, you know, or a police officer. Those all have very different starting salaries. So just because you have a degree doesn't guarantee you're going to make $100 grand your first year out. Believe me, I know this too.
Or your 20th year out.
Right. But I do think a lot of students, especially right out of high school, kind of have a false perception that if I get a degree, everything's gravy after that. It's about you working to that point and getting where you need to be, not just because you have a degree, but because of the experience you've gained along the way, what your work ethic is, what your GPA is, what, you know, all of those things build in together to get you where you're going to be after graduation. So a couple of things, I think we've talked about most of them here. Paying interest on your unsubsidized loans during in-school status or during your grace period can help keep that interest paid up. The bullet right before that, return part or all of your refund check. We just are in the process, and you might have, if you have loans now, you probably got a letter from us recently that said you have a loan that has been recently dispersed and you have a right to return it if you want to. So we send out right to cancel letters every single semester. It's part of our federal loan disclosure requirements. But we do that also giving you the option that if you get an excess refund check, you know, your financial aid is more than what you owe the school, so we give the rest to you to pay for educational expenses. That's part of the legality of it. If you get that check and you've paid up all your bills and you don't need what's left over, you can bring it back to us and we'll make a payment on your loan for you. The beauty of doing that within the same semester of when you receive that loan is it's not just a payment on your loan, it's actually a cancellation of that portion of the loan. So the 1% loan fee that came off the top and any interest that's accrued is also erased. So for us, returning the money for you in the same semester actually saves you more money than if you were just to take your own check and send them a payment. Does that make sense? Because if you borrow $5,500, you're not getting $5,500 here to the school. The loan company's keeping 1% of it for doing their job. Does So you're still paying for that $5,500 as your loan, but you're not getting the full amount back. So if we in turn cancel a portion of it for you because you don't want all of it, it cancels that portion of the fee and it cancels any interest that's accrued on it. Does that make sense? But we have to do it within the same semester that it was issued to you. So we choose to do that for you. Some schools won't do that because they don't want the extra work. But we make that an option for you because we want to help you minimize your debt as much as possible. And we do have students that take us up on it every semester. You know, they borrow what they think they need, they budget everything out, just in case kind of scenarios. They get their refund check, they pay up everything they need. Oh, I don't need that extra $500, or I don't need that $2,000. And then they let us know. The bursar's office will process their funds for them, and then we return it back to their loan for them. So that's something we can do for you any semester.
So if you have somebody that borrows $4,000 and another that borrows $6,000, but the person that borrows $6,000 takes $2,000, pays it back to you, which one's benefiting the most if the other one with $4,000 keeps it and doesn't repay?
The one who repaid the $2,000 is better off.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Well, simply because in the end, they both have $4,000 worth of debt. But the one that had $6,000 to begin with is getting the benefit of that full $2,000 being refunded or returned, rather than $2,000 less the 1% of it that the loan company keeps for processing it. Because if you just let it lapse and you let the semester go, then that 1% is your debt and you didn't get it. You know, you paid the loan company to process it for you, basically. So in that scenario, paying $2,000 back puts them on equal footing. They both have $4,000 worth of debt. But the $2,000 is completely erased, rather than a payment is different than a return. So if we return it, it truly cancels out that portion of the loan, so it doesn't exist anymore. Whereas if you guys get the money and then you just say, hey, use my loan service, or I want to send a payment to them, it truly is processed like a payment. Interest plus principal. So all those fees and everything are still on the books. Does that make sense? Of course, graduating on time, working part-time during the semester or full-time during the summer break. With summer coming up, I don't know if you have all been interested or looking at it. There's a lot of paid internships that different departments know about. Visit with your academic advisor. Each department may know of companies locally and some that are nationally, where students go away for 6-8 weeks of the summer and they get paid really well to do a job that's in their field. And then they can come home with a little extra cash and some great work experience to put on their resume and some networkings of people that may be able to help them find a job when they finish school too. So those part-time jobs and those internships are not just always for the spending money that they accumulate. Sometimes it's also, you know, the people getting in touch with the right folks and getting into the right groove of, is this really what I want to do with my life? You know, am I in the right field? Do I really like the hands-on day-to-day job of this or not? Helps you kind of test the waters out that way too. Of course, switching majors or transferring to other schools can sometimes add the length of time it takes you to finish. We talked a little bit about those maximums and the different time frames that you have to complete your degree, and all of those things impact that. Not that it can't be done, it's just that it does have a cost assigned to it. Okay, we talked a little bit about paying back your loans. Your total student loan debt should not exceed your expected salary. If you borrow more than your expected salary, okay, say you're going into teaching and the average starting salary is $30,000, you really shouldn't borrow more than $30,000 for your entire loan debt. That's just a really basic rule of thumb. If you really sit down and put numbers to it, your loan payment should still be less than 8% of your total gross income. So there's lots of different ways you can analyze it to make sure you're on track, but you know, the bottom line is, guys, don't take it if you don't need it. If it's just extra money you want to shop with, or you know, go buy something that you really don't need, it's probably not worth it in the long run, because you're going to be paying a lot more for it in the end. A couple things in thinking of your salary and what you're going to make when you get out of school, hopefully. If most of you seemed pretty clear on your major, you know what direction you're in. Take a look at salary.com and you can put in your field, you can put in the kind of jobs that you're interested in getting when you graduate, and it will tell you anywhere in the geographic US what those average starting salaries are. You know, someone living in Chicago is going to make a completely different amount per year than someone living here in Joplin as a teacher. Maybe the exact same job, but the cost of living in those cities are very different. So salary.com is a great place to just kind of start looking what the going rate is for people in your field. At least you have a realistic expectation of what you're shooting for. And sometimes that makes a difference on what your minor is. Sometimes that makes a difference on what you really think you want to do with this degree. You know, you might be leaning towards something else, but when you look at the salary differences, that might help you guide yourself a little bit better into a certain field or a certain specific job occupation that you're interested in pursuing. So another just little tool to take a look at. Career Services Office here on campus has a lot of resources to help you along those same lines. They'll help counsel you on different careers and different salaries that are available. They do market research on our graduates here from Southern, so they can tell you what a nurse leaving here typically makes when they start, because they've surveyed all of those folks when they leave here. They can tell you what a teacher makes. They can tell you what maybe an art education person makes. All of those different types of things, they have that kind of data. So if you're interested, at least you could look at it from the reality of what's happening with Missouri Southern students, not just a general, what's happening in the country. They do a lot of inventory, so people who are undecided, don't really know what direction they want to go career-wise, they can do some different inventories and help guide them in the right direction that way too. So Career Services is another resource for you. Their office is in the Spiva Library. This kind of gets into a budgeting piece, and we have till quarter after, is that right, or we have till 2?
Yeah, we'll wrap just a few minutes early so they can do their evaluation.
Okay.
But yeah, we've got a little bit of time.
This little clip, if we have sound, we'll talk about some budgeting tips, which I think is really useful.
Hello everybody, it's Larissa here with YoungFreeAlberta.com, and today I'm going to show you how you can start managing your money right now using a shoebox budget. The guidelines for this budgeting system were written by Trent from thesimpledollar.com. To visit his original blog post, just click on the link in the YouTube sidebar. You've heard it 100 times before, one of the most important steps in managing your finances is to set up a budget. Truth is, people have no idea how to do it. Sure, there are tons of resources on how to build a budget, but the templates don't always fit with your lifestyle, the calculations can get kind of complicated, and the whole process ends up becoming way more intimidating than it should be. The shoebox budget is simple, practical, and efficient, so it's perfect if you're new to budgeting. Most personal finance books will tell you to sit down and come up with a dollar limit for all aspects of your life right off the bat. This advice is especially pointless for new budgeters because in order to set a realistic goal, you need to know how much you're spending right now. And that brings us to step 1. Save every statement for at least 1 month. Get a shoebox or other container and create a pile for money coming in and a second pile for money going out. So things like pay stubs and paychecks would go into the in pile, whereas things like bills, checks, and receipts would all go into the out pile. Every single penny that you spend or earn must be documented in some way. It's actually not that hard to do. Save all your bill statements and receipts, and keep copies of any checks you write. If all else fails, you can always keep a little notebook in your pocket or purse, or a slip of paper in your wallet to write down expenses that you can't document in other ways. If you withdraw any cash, jot down what you did with it on the back of the ATM slip. At the end of each day, empty your wallet and put all your notes and receipts into the appropriate shoebox. Continue this for 1 month. It's important to be diligent in tracking your spending. Otherwise, it's very difficult to plan a realistic budget. Step 2, sort your statements. Make sure you give yourself enough space for this one. Group your expenses in little piles on the floor. Choose categories that make sense to you and your lifestyle, because that's where all the personal finance books fall short. Some example categories include essential utilities like electric and water, non-essential utilities like cable or internet, gas, other car-related expenses, real food, junk food in restaurants, clothing, household items, books and magazines, movies, and miscellaneous. Add whatever categories you need need to. For instance, you might need a bank fees category if you don't have a Young and Free account. Go to youngfreealberta.com for details. Other categories could be insurance, student loans, video games, if that's a regular expense for you. You want your categories to accurately reflect your spending habits. It could happen that one receipt falls under several categories, like if you buy household items and food in the same shopping trip. What you want to do in this case is to move all the items to their appropriate categories. For any items you move, subtract their cost, including sales tax, from the receipt and write down the new total. Then make a note for the price of the removed item, including sales tax, and add it to the appropriate pile. Step 3, add them up. Find a notebook that you can devote to budgeting. Add up the totals in each category and write them down. If you've been saving your data for more than 1 month, divide your totals by the number of months you've been saving your statements for before writing them down. Once you've logged all your categories individually, add them all together. Do the same for your earnings over an average month. These two little numbers are going to tell you where you stand financially. Hopefully, you're spending less than you earn. Step 4, reduce your spending. When your expenses are categorized, it's much easier to go through them and see where you could be saving money. But be realistic. Some categories are easier to modify than others, and the key is finding those little, manageable things that you can do to curb your spending. For instance, a trip to the library can save you some money on books. Eating at home 1 more time per week could reduce your food costs. And you can cut entertainment costs by renting movies instead of going out to see them. Find those little things that make a difference. If you need more ideas, visit youngfreealberta.com/makesense. Step 5, set your budget. Start by writing out your categories for the next month. Once you've identified all the ways you can save, choose 5 of them to stick with for the next month. Estimate how much money these will save you and then subtract them from the total in that category. These will be your target numbers for the next month. Also, add an additional category called flexible and give it a dollar amount equal to 5% of your earnings. This is the money you can use to cover any unexpected or emergency expenses next month. At the end of next month, if you have money left over in the flexible category, you can put it into a savings account. Congratulations! You've just made your first budget. Step 6, try it. For the following month, do everything as normal, but add in those 5 little changes. The budget you've created is very realistic, so you should be able to meet your goals. It might happen that you're a little bit under in some categories and a little bit over in others, but as long as you understand why it's happening, then it's okay. At the end of the next month, you'll find that you saved a little more. You can put your extra savings into a savings account or use it to make an extra payment on a loan. And step 7, repeat it. Budgeting works only if you do it regularly, so make it a habit to go over your budget at the end of each month. See whether or not you're making your targets. If you are, take your leftover money and create a new category, savings. Don't be afraid to adjust your numbers. If you're feeling confident, try out another cost-cutting goal. If you're struggling in a category, adjust that number upwards and just lower the amount that you're putting into savings. As time goes by, your budget will start feeling more natural and you'll become more financially stable. So try it out right now. I know you can do it. I want to know how your shoebox budget is doing. Send me an email at youngfreealberta@gmail.com, or if you have another money matter question, you can always ask the experts on the Young and Free Makes Sense page located at www.youngfreealberta.com/makesense. All the links are also provided in the YouTube sidebar, so you can check them out there. Good luck and see you next time.
Did you notice she's from Canada? See the money that she held up was Canadian $20 bill. That's just one way to think about how you manage your money. I mean, that's a very simplistic way to do it, but it's very relevant and it does work. There's lots of other ways that you can look at it from a budgeting standpoint, but we really just kind of want to impress upon you how important it is just to know what's coming in and what's going out so that you are spending, no more than what you have to work with. One of my favorite quotes is, "He who fails to plan, plans to fail." And I know from the office I work in and my experience as a student, it really does help to ask lots of questions and have a goal, have a plan, have something of a roadmap to help you get where you need to be. So utilize those resources around you. Of course, anybody in Project Stay can help you get in touch with us in financial aid. Of course, we're always available, and you probably have lots of other lifelines that you can refer to as well. So utilize them because it definitely will help you get where you need to be. I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the presentation that I would give you the National Student Loan Database website. It's the first bullet listed up there, nslds.ed.gov. That's where you can take a look at any of your federal loan debt. It also shows your Pell Grant history from the federal government databases. Of course, our contact information, myself and Sharon Frazier, who's our default prevention counselor. Sharon is the one that will do your exit counseling when you get ready to graduate. She's the one that's going to talk to you about repaying your student loans. She's going to be your lifeline when you leave here if you have student loan debt and you have any questions about navigating through that process. So her contact information is listed there. Of course, your financial aid counselors help you along the way while you're here now. They're the ones processing your FAFSA application and putting your awards on and making the adjustments there. So depending on what your last name is who you're assigned to. So take a look at those and make sure you know who that person is for you. And I know we're kind of running out of time, so I don't have a prescribed list of questions for you, but if there's anything specific that we didn't cover, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So your interest starts accruing from the day that they give you the money.
On an unsubsidized loan.
On unsubsidized.
If it's
on
subsidized, the
subsidized,
government's paying it for you until you get out of school.
until the deferment period is over, or the 6 months.
Mhm. So sub is always better than unsub.
So
If you have
on
a
the
choice.
unsubs, if it's a 10-year and it takes you 4 years, say you took it out as a freshman, does the 4 years come off the 10 years?
You'll still get a 10-year repayment once you enter
Once you
repayment.
enter repayment.
So really, yeah, that loan could be on the books 14, 15 years.
Yeah, agreed.
Yep.
On the FAFSA, if you've been selected for verification, will you get that each time, or is that a,
Verification is a randomly selected process that the Department of Education has. They have the best way to explain it is they have a computer system that models who should be selected and not. They don't tell any of us schools what that modeling program says. My experience tells me your Pell eligible people are going to be selected for verification more than non-Pell eligible people. Your lower income folks that are getting the maximum federal dollars are the ones that are going to be selected. The criteria does change from year to year. So some families probably are going to get selected all 4 years because their situation puts them in that same category every single time. But it is a somewhat random selection because they do just grab some of them randomly just to help their statistics and things like that to make sure that they really are preventing fraud holistically. But there is a method to their madness, but they don't share it.
What's verification?
Verification is when your FAFSA application requires you to provide the financial aid office with additional information to prove that your numbers are correct.
Oh.
So we ask for tax transcripts now, or a verification worksheet, or proof of how you lived on low income, or whatever. Different things that the financial aid office would ask you for. It's because your FAFSA application was selected for verification. That's a financial aid term, but it's very common to some people.
every year for 6 years?
Yeah. So
Just
you
saying.
probably have just the right mix
Just
of
saying.
numbers, your income, your household size, all of those things are the right mix that puts you in that bucket.
It's easy, it's not.
It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. It doesn't mean you're being audited because you're being suspected of fraud or anything. It's really more of a double check for the government to make sure we're giving the right money to the right students. It's just
They're pretty sure about me.
we've checked it every year for you. Good questions.
On that website up there, will it tell you like the interest that you've accumulated on your unsubsidized loan?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know.
It does, doesn't it? It shows outstanding principal balance and it shows the accumulated amount. It may not break it down by interest, but you can see the two
No, it does,
differences,
it's
right?
an outstanding interest.
Great.
It tells you, like, here,
Thank you.
here's my direct stuff, unsubsidized, and my subsidized, and then this is the interest that I owe.
Yep. Yep. You can make a payment anytime and you can make a payment one time and never do it again and not be penalized. If you're in school now, and you've started making payments, but then something comes up and you can't anymore, that's okay. Because you're not required to make payments. Anything you elect to do now is just helping you.
If you manage to graduate in December instead of in May, and you still have student loan available here for that year that you think that might happen in, and you plan on going to graduate school, do you need to list both places?
Yes.
So that they can take the second half to
Yep.
apply starting there in
Yes,
January?
and you actually wouldn't even get that same second half, because once you graduated with a bachelor's degree in December, you actually will start a new degree program as a master's level student, and the loan amounts are different for graduate students than they are for undergraduate. So you will get a same loan, federal Stafford loan, but it's a different grade level and a different dollar amount that
So
would be
it'd be a
available to
different
you.
dollar amount, I was trying to figure out how to make that happen.
Graduate loans have a much higher ceiling annually and aggregate.
Okay.
Yep, so those of you going to med school or law school or, you know, planning to get a master's, you have a larger window to borrow against than
You still get Pell Grants for graduate school?
once you have a bachelor's degree, first bachelor's, the grants go away. And that doesn't matter where you get them, that's a federal regulation. Thank you all, this has been good, I hope you've learned something today.
A lot, thank you.
And know that our doors are always open to help you.